So this is the Mount Shasta Library then.
Yeah, check it out. And you can see, look, there's even like a dolphin parked here, like our normal podcast place. You can actually see I don't know if you can see Mount Shasta. That's actually Mount Shasta
I
right
can see
there.
it. I can see it.
So finally got the fucking, I went to like 3 different cafes and they don't have Wi-Fi, but dude, at least there's this public Wi-Fi here. So
you're in, where is,
I'm in Mount Shasta.
so the name of the town is Mount Shasta.
Yeah, it's really confusing. And I bet there's probably a lot of people who navigated to like the parking lot of the Mount Shasta summit or something when they were trying to,
How the fuck can 3 different what do they say when you ask if they have Wi-Fi?
They're just like, no, we don't. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's fine.
What are they doing?
I know, that's what a cafe is. It's primarily a Wi-Fi access point that also sells coffee, from my perspective. But
from mine too. What is the vibe of each of these 3 places that you walk into that they're apparently completely happy running a cafe business without Wi-Fi?
They're busy. It's kind of like a grab and go type situation.
Okay.
I mean, I was originally planning on using my hotspot, but for some reason it's just not functioning, which is weird because the phone has internet.
Oh, well, you know what it is? It's the Lumerians projecting their hollow earth Mount Shasta shield.
Yeah. Oh, there's probably some sort of like electromagnetic anomaly inside that mountain over there that is protecting us from 5G. I sure hope it is. That's why I'm here.
So you're plenty aware of the Mount Shasta mystique of of hippieism and complete batshit crazy shit.
I like it though. I like that kind of batshit. I can get behind. I like that kind of.
Is that in the vibe of this town? Like, can you sense it in any way?
I got here last night, so I can't. Well, okay, let's say we're saying sensing it in the present moment.
I mean, no Wi-Fi in 3 different cafes is pretty fucking insane.
It's pretty suspicious. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely this place. I actually like the vibe of this place. Yeah, it's a good place. There's a lot of van life people who are here.
Yeah,
like on various stages of the van life totem pole. You can definitely see
some people in advanced stages that have become physically grafted to their vans.
Stage 4 van metastasis, where it's just like you have like a cooler, a propane tank, several tarps, 80 different bungee cords, a trash bag that's just like conglomerating on top of your vehicle.
Where does the physical body end and the van begin?
Exactly. That's an open question. But it's nice. I mean, there's something about places that snow in the winter that actually makes them somewhat more amenable to transients, van life culture, because it's like a filter where you have to, like, only the hardy organisms survive the winter. And so you end up with a kind of like resilient population of hanger-on people in these places. I think that's why mountain towns are like, well, maybe it's just because they're out of the way, and like generally people here are a little just weirder, a little more insular, which is kind of a good thing. At least I think in the current climate, it seems that like, hey, I'll take insularity any day because, you know, it's the lowland. The lowlanders are the ones who've gone mad in the present time. It really is.
Just by being too connected to their Wi-Fi hotspots.
Exactly. Their society has become a Wi-Fi hotspot, and they're all connected to the same stupid signal, and it sucks. People up here are a little more feral. I mean, I don't know. I'm in a pretty feral situation. I got a pretty good setup right here. I don't know if you can see my solar panel over there, battery.
Oh, sick.
Converting the sun's rays into DC power. No. Yeah, into DC power, which then an inverter is converting to AC power, which then my computer is converting back to DC power to power this computer. So it is not what I would call efficient, but um, the fact that it's happening at all is kind of a miracle.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's fucking amazing. Yeah.
I'm trying to form some kind of question about the insular nature of these mountain town people, and you're not used to as a city boy, you're not used to thinking of the mountain folk as having particularly healthy psyches.
Yeah.
The narrative is that's where hicks are, and they think nonsense, and they just they stew in their own dogmatic juices.
It's a pretty good way of putting it. I actually, I don't know. I think that narrative is a bit dated.
But it
Feels
sounds
that
like
way to
what
me.
you're responding positively to is pure freshness, regardless of agreeing with it or not. You just want a narrative and an attitude that's different. Any kind of attitude, any kind of narrative.
Yeah, I think that just the existence of narrative diversity in the air is
Yeah.
a invigorating scent, kind of like where you just catch like a, where you just see like um, the bougie double masked people walking into the fancy tourist grocery store. There's that narrative, and then
Uh-huh.
there's like the poor people at the laundromat across the street, and they're in a different world. And um, then there's kind of the van people, and the van people are just feel like they're almost like interlopers. And I don't know. I think almost that like nomadism itself is a in some sense it's a generalized response to societal turmoil, or like deep narrative turmoil is like, because nomadism is it's the spectator. It's like the desert Bedouins or the gypsies or the just nomadic pastoralists that just kind of go through and like go up to a
Mm-hmm.
town and be like, okay, this is what you guys are on about.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have any, and what the thing that gives you is it's the ability to opt out of conflict, because you can be like, well, this is your town, these are your gods, and then
Mm-hmm.
these are our gods, and
Mm-hmm.
we can just trade with you. Okay, bye.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of relationship, I think, is almost like a defensive posture that people assume when, I mean, I feel like I feel myself not materially assuming that, because I still have a house in a town, but psychically, I feel like I'm assuming that posture a little bit, that I'm getting used to the idea of just passing through a town, and that's kind of like the idea that you can just leave and you can kind of like plant yourself in and sample different like vibes
Mm-hmm.
is sort of like I think it's like something that is almost like a counterbalancing force to the kind of like homogenization and conformism that is created by
Yeah.
social networks as currently implemented.
Yeah, I'm certainly observing that ability grow in myself and in all the career decisions I'm making. They're all decisions that can be location independent, and everything I'm growing is of that nature. Um, just because it does seem like the more practical, stable option, um, in case the place you're living becomes tyrannical. You,
Yeah,
I,
just bug
I,
out.
I want to be able to leave and still have all my projects be growing apace,
Yeah,
no matter where I am. Um, Chico used to have in my mind, I think it still does. Who the fuck knows? That conflict or that mix of different ways of life that
Yeah.
is a big part of why it's so fertile and rich in
Yeah.
my mind, because it's orchards, it's farmers, it's the conservative view of life that
Yeah.
that seems to require or predispose itself to. And then it's also a college town with just bucket loads of liberals uh, coming in to teach and to get degrees
Yeah.
there. And the it, the coexisting together makes a much more rich, I want to say dynamic atmosphere, but what makes the mix possible is Chico's unique relaxation, which isn't
Yeah.
which is not dynamic. It's this stable relaxation that's kind of like the Shire and the Hobbits.
A little bit, yeah. People don't. It's hard to imagine people in Chico really getting up in arms about something. Um, yeah, it definitely seems like there's a kind of social consensus that you shouldn't fuck up general like quality of life stuff
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like making everyone angry or something. You know what I mean, like that. Like, yeah, it's definitely a lower. It feels like a lower stakes social environment. I think Chico is really good in that sense. Um, Maybe because it's almost like doesn't have some kind of identity that it feels like it has to defend. Maybe like I don't really know what you know, like Mount Shasta, for example. This town, I think, is definitely fancies itself. People who live here, it has a kind of self consciousness as a center of higher consciousness. With the UFO people, or the crystal hippies, or the like probably some actual genuine
Aliens.
I was going to say magic of some kind going on here. I mean, certainly I won't like deny that, but like I think it's like when you have yeah.
Okay. What
um
you're the one who said it, so I'm gonna ask what completely irrational percentage probability, how probable do you think that there's some actual magic being enacted by actual humans in Mount Shasta?
it gets
How
down to the
likely?
I mean, this is like just we're talking about the definition of the word magic. That's what it always comes down to.
Your
um
definition, like
oh well then,
what
my
you would
definition.
what you would see as physically impossible, and so it's magic happening now in Mount Shasta, enacted by people.
oh
What
I wouldn't
percentage likelihood?
I wouldn't define magic as something that's physically impossible. I would define magic as like um kind of a like a sort of like a manifest like a like a distinctive manifestation of consciousness, a kind of uncalled for, unpredictable manifestation of consciousness. I think by that definition, there's like it's like virtually certain. There's like a 99% chance that there's some very um,
But that definition
aware people here.
that definition has like robbed all the magic of the word magic.
Yeah, but I still want to believe in magic, so
you
I'm
just
defining it in a way that makes it real.
you
See
just
what I'm doing?
you just opened up magic to everyone with that
Uh,
definition.
yeah, I don't really believe in muggles and wizards. I think it's egalitarian. I think that like that if you I think that you can demagicify the world. I think the world is it's in a state of native magic. It's like, and we just have concentrated regions of disenchantment.
I
And
think you're
those,
I
mm,
think you're probably right. I think you're probably right about that. That's like that's something you hope you rediscover in a turning over a new leaf after a big old Great Depression, is that, or that's at least what I grab onto and cultivate a new awareness of, is the basic state of grace that I'm inhabiting,
Yeah.
and that all the trees and birds are like broadcasting,
Yeah.
and your body, like your heart is beating.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck started that going? How
It's a
is
hell
that?
it's a
How
hell
is
of a
that still going?
it's a hell of a bedrock. And it's sort of like you have to come be honest with yourself, and if no matter what happens to you, you still are faced ultimately with the question, inevitably, would you really prefer non-existence to having a body and having your heart beating and having the sun shining? Because I don't know how many people, if they really had enough time and space to consider that question, would prefer not to exist. Because I feel like even if, let's say you didn't want to exist, sooner or later you're just going to exist again. So you're back where you fucking started. Like you were dead for billions of years before you were born. So you didn't really ask for this, you know what I mean? Or did you? I mean, that's a whole other line of question. But it's kind of from your perspective, it's irrelevant. It's almost like you have to consider your life, the fact that you exist, as kind of just like a more general archetypical state that you're always existence isn't a choice. I think it might be a choice to end your particular mode of existence, but the fact that existence is possible and that you might exist again isn't something you can opt out of unless you, I mean, I don't know, I guess that's what the whole like wheel of dharma thing is about, but that to me that seems like just like a wish fulfillment in a weird sort of way that I really don't think it's possible to escape the wheel of dharma. I really don't think it is. Like some monks might have convinced themselves that they did, but really, are you sure? Maybe you just escaped it for a billion years, but you're gonna come back one day. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's it doesn't seem like that's supported by the evidence to me.
A particular quote comes to mind from the channeled Jane Roberts books, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm so fond of.
Yeah.
And the quote goes, "You're as dead now as you'll ever be." From the point of view of a voice that's purporting to be
Right.
done with physical existence, did a
Mm.
bunch of physical lives, and is now post physical into something even more real from his point of view than
Yeah.
being physical was. And from that voice's point of view, every soul is an eternally progressing, eternally exploring node of creativity. And from his that point of view is when that is where that quote is contextualized, that you're as dead now as you'll ever be. And it's I that quote is also related to a favorite shitty indie movie of mine called Wrist Cutters.
Oh, that's like that magical realism. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Um, the protagonist kills himself, and the female love interest also kills herself around the same time, and they fall in love. Um, but he kills himself, and that's how the movie starts. And he just goes to another world that's slightly shittier, full of people who also killed themselves. And he's still faced with all the same problems
Yeah.
that he thought he was leaving behind.
Yeah.
And they are faced with the basic nihilism of existence they thought they were denying. And it comes to the same point of he has to choose to live
Yeah.
from that point or from a point before he killed himself.
Yeah.
He has to choose to say yes to his experience at some point.
At some fucking point. Take as long as you need to, but you got to do it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And whatever point you're at, you're as dead and as alive, or as alive now as you'll ever be. Like, you're still getting the projection of your inner psyche played out for your senses to explore, and you have free will choices to make. I mean, it's a bootless line of questioning for someone who's strictly materialist and is unwilling to entertain any future probability except void. at
Yeah.
the end of the experience. But for me, it's incredibly evocative.
Yeah. That whole question that like thinking that
Because, sorry,
yeah. No,
sorry,
no, go for it. Yeah, yeah.
because you fucking see people who are dead, death walking. They are
Mm.
not alive. And that's just another way of saying they're sleepwalking, I guess.
Yeah. And you see different moods pass over people's faces too, where you can see like a cloud of death on someone. It kind of pushes him down for a second, and then like it's even yeah, day to day, people can have different embodiments, like different amounts of life that they're embodying. Mm, yeah, that's I think like that. Presuming that you have some kind of void after you die is kind of a sort of it's like a faith proposition in a sense that you're, which it's a little bit odd because no one has ever experienced not existing actually. Um, the only people have because you have to exist to experience anything. So there has never been a single example of anyone not existing.
Oh,
Actually,
I think it's completely within the realm of consciousness to hallucinate a void experience.
right. But that's
I
not
think that
truly a void, though. That's the thing.
yeah, you're making a non-existence experience for yourself. I think
So that
that's with it.
yeah. See,
I don't know what that
this
means.
is that's well, it's getting at the metaphysical point of all this, which is that if you admit any possibility of change whatsoever, of future, um, as distinct from present, of any sort of volume of an experience, any sort of potentiality, it's not truly non-existence. And time doesn't really matter because, our time scale wise is like, you know, infinitesimally small compared to all the time that we're pretty sure existed, at least by looking at the past, what we can observe.
Yeah.
Just to say nothing of the future that we can't observe, but is probably seems like it's totally going to exist. So, or does exist in some sense. So, yeah, we have like a little limited window. It is pretty presumptuous to kind of use this infinitesimal point as the like measuring stick for what other times contain as far as our conscious experience is concerned. You know, what kind of conscious experience was going on shortly after the Big Bang? Was there any? That's an interesting question. If you even if you take the solely the base materialist narrative, which I think actually the Big Bang happened. I think there's a tremendous amount of evidence for the Big Bang. I've studied it in depth. There is some amazing um, discoveries just strictly from a materialist standpoint that you can say some amazingly well supported things about the beginning of the universe from an energy, matter, gravity, time standpoint. We don't know what are the gaps there. We don't know what we're not seeing. We don't know what aspects of the world, you know, we can't rule anything out at those times, but we can say positively, sometime about 20 billion years ago, something
We
happened that created a space. Yeah.
we can weave a very cohesive story out of the
Yes.
physical rules that we're
Yes.
using right
And
now.
a self-consistent story with those rules. Now, there's definitely a few edge cases and loose ends, and that's where all the interesting progress is happening, is chasing down those loose ends. But
I don't know.
mhm,
The story itself seems so not cohesive with reality at all to me
well,
that to even have a beginning and a point that it big banged out from, it just seems completely nonsensical to me. What I do is project my own lived experience on it,
right.
of course, and go, no, 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 we're just seeing a snapshot of eternity,
Yeah.
observing that things are expanding, and so projecting that infinitely
Yeah.
because that's the one slice of eternity we can be aware of.
Yeah.
And because I'm a body, primarily and a human primarily, I intuit that it's much more like we're seeing the exhalation of eternity,
Sure.
and it inhales after a certain few billion years, at which point it'll
Right.
re-big bang out into a new
Well, yeah,
exhalation.
so it's amazing you bring that up because that's always been my intuition as well. Just a quick point of clarification about the Big Bang. The actual current physical theory of the Big Bang doesn't imply that anything came out of a particular point. It's sort of like there's no special point in the universe. It's that space itself, the volume of like geometric space, kind of started from an infinitesimal point and expanded outward. And so the volume of the universe itself, like space and time, expanded.
See,
Um,
that's
that
inextricable. That's
mm,
God. I'm a fucking artist, so
I know
poetically, that's the same thing as saying a mind was birthed into the world
it
and
is. Yeah.
immediately began projecting its physical rule set
Yes.
on the greater multi-dimensional fabric it found itself in. So
Yes.
a mind that needs space and three-dimensional forms
Yeah.
came into being in a greater world that didn't need space as a rule, didn't need
Right.
time as a rule.
Right.
And so into that non-space, non-time, a mind that thought in terms of space and time
Yeah.
began learning and growing.
Yes. Space and time is an idea. It's a framework by which you can create higher level abstractions by using the base elements of these points, these coordinates, and that is entirely consistent with the physical theory. I am very much partial to that interpretation that you just laid out as well. That there is nothing particularly real about space and time that makes it any more real than other thoughts, except it's just that those space and time thoughts are so fundamental because evolution has been working with that base material, and that's so deep, deep, deep in the blockchain of the world that those are the foundational bits of information that have been used to kind of construct this whole reality that we're living in. But there's nothing, they don't fundamentally have a higher level existence than other thoughts that we maybe have. The thoughts we have right now are just more provisional in the sense that other things have not yet depended on them. But we don't know. You know, in the future, we're not sure what depends on what we're doing right now. So it could be that some of the things that we're saying or some of the technology that we're creating is as foundational to the future physics of the universe as the technology of molecules or the technology of atoms, which is what molecules are based on, or the technology of, like waveforms, which is what, nuclear particles are ultimately based on, and everything's based on. But I wanted to see, before I jump onto that clarification, there was a point about something. Oh yeah, back to that cyclical thing. There
Okay.
actually is, I think, a very well supported interpretation of Big Bang cosmology that's a bit modified, and it's
I
been,
also just fucking
yeah,
hate the phrase the Big
it's stupid.
Bang.
It's stupid.
It's so ugly and awkward and like, wow, the most like nerdy glasses, fucking pin
These,
pocket
I know,
protector, no
it's
imagination guy
it's
at all came
well,
up
it's
with that.
stupid. It's stupid because those people are the ones that our culture trusts to give us an origin story. Because no,
Yeah.
it's because we don't have religion. Because we murdered God. Like, okay, so like whatever, getting into the whole like Night territory here. So, and we, yeah, I mean, it's like,
I interrupted you. I'm
no, it's
sorry.
fine. No, it's a really good point. Yeah, we outsourced our like,
Our ability to give a name to our origins
yeah,
to fucking people who are gonna call it the Big Bang.
that's why the world isn't magic anymore, is because it's like, who's in charge here? Like, oh, this nerd guy, I guess he has a really big degree. Gee, what do you call it? What do you call the universe? It was a bang. There's math or something, and like, okay, yeah, that math does make sense, but it only makes sense in a very strict. And so there's like this incredible wasteland of disenchantment that now we're like filling in piecemeal because we don't have a foundational transcendent myth. Like, I totally agree
Yes,
with that.
scientists need to be artists.
Indeed. And actually, wow, that really brings me to Sir Roger Penrose, who
I hope that's where you were going anyway.
No, that's where I was going. He's the one who
Okay.
came up with this cosmological theory that I personally like subscribe to, you know.
Okay.
He is called cyclic conformal cosmology. And
Of cyclic conformal cosmology.
Yeah. And
conformal. That's
yes,
a word?
yeah, it's like in a geometric sense that the what it's getting at is that the ultimate state, in state, if you take physical laws and you carry them out trillions of years into the future, the geometry of space that is predicted by that in state is physically and mathematically equivalent from us when characterized in a certain way with the beginning state of the physical universe as predicted by the laws as we currently understand them. So it creates this kind of like looping around where the far future and the far past are functionally indistinguishable. And and Sir Roger Penrose, you know, he's the one who these, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever seen. It's interesting you brought up the whole point about scientists not being artists. Well, he actually probably among all cosmologists is the most artistic among them, at least as popularly understood, because, you know, he's created Penrose tiling. It's those kind of things that are like these geometric shapes that are special, and you can stack them and create these elaborate repeating patterns. And yeah, a lot of his theories are actually based on geometric intuition. So he's quite a, that would probably be something that'd be good to cut into the pod, honestly, as a visual. It's kind of hard to describe.
I got it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I don't know. I think his take on it is a lot more in line with intuition about, you know, the eternal nature and cyclic nature, because everything in the world is in cycles. Life is in cycles, planets cycles. I mean, we had an entire fucking podcast about circles. We don't need to rehash this. I don't know what episode that was.
Well, by its rules, we do need to rehash it eventually.
Oh shit, yeah. Yeah, that was the podcast where we calculated the fucking some
we figured out the numerical order of
some
existence.
Prophecies based on the Urantia book. Yeah, I'm gonna submit this for publication in the Cosmological Journal, and if they reject it, it's because there's a conspiracy. I've already made up my mind.
I think it would be so fun to see see how the Urantia book hits you, because you're a little more like rational of a person than I am, and
I'm aspiring to be less rational. But yeah, I'm coming from a state of pretty strict rationality.
And this book, like I used the metaphor before, the Urantia book is a literal Voynich manuscript that is trying to communicate to humans. It's completely flabbergasting that this object exists and that it's managed to instantiate itself into our world enough to have sold 700,000 copies maybe or so.
And now when we're making a fucking podcast about it, and like, why are we still talking about this thing?
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing. Or it's just, there are like pyramids of Gaza in places you wouldn't expect, like, or mysteries, or Antikythera mechanisms, like, you know, that Greek clock thing. Yeah,
very, very familiar with that.
Yeah.
No, that is, the cultural landscape does have similarly inexplicable artifacts that are sitting there demanding explanation. Oh, dude, sorry, a completely different tangent in terms of like, we were talking about like archaeological crazy shit. You know, they discovered some giant fucking camel carved into a rock in Saudi Arabia. They already knew about it, but they thought it was like about 2,000 years old. They actually found out based on like reevaluating some dating stuff that it's actually about like 7,500 years old. so it's like more than 3 times older than they thought it had been.
Huh.
And when I read that, I was like,
Where did you say it was again?
Saudi Arabia.
Have they dug it up at this point?
Yeah, it's just carved into a rock sitting in the desert. It's carved into a big rock face. It's this giant camel sculpture. It's fairly highly eroded, but it is
In Saudi Arabia? Arabia?
Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And because so the Sahara Desert used to be a lot greener than it is now, and it used to have a significant population of people living there, and a lot of there's been an kind of an oversight, a lot of archaeological oversight because of that, because people think like, oh, it's not possible, people could have created things here, so we don't look for them, and then you discover them, and my mind just goes like, paging Graham Hancock, holy shit, like
Yeah.
it's really speaks to like the idea that like, yeah, maybe um something that he said one time is actually kind of reminded me of something he said one time, which is that mainstream archaeology, you know, is attached to its ideas that the only civilizations that existed in those like 7,000 8,000 years ago were like hunter gatherer type people, or maybe like very early agriculture. But and so sure enough, in this article that was, I think it was like BBC or something, but it was like it had a line in it that was like, yeah, scientists think that like hunter gatherers created this carving as a way to like gather at every year, and I'm like, no,
As
they
a way
fucking
to
didn't.
as a way to keep our dogmatic
No,
narrative consistent, we've
exactly.
decided hunter-gatherers built
I'm
this.
like, oh yeah, so you're telling me that people who they have like, tents, and like maybe they made a wooden bowl, and then like they're living, they have these artifacts that are like small. You're telling me they created a massive, 6-story high scaffolding and stone tools and drug rocks from miles away? No, bullshit. There's no way that people living off the land, surviving day to day in the desert, did that. That is the work of a stratified society where you have a class of
Yeah.
people who can devote themselves to that, because that takes insane specialized knowledge. There's no way that
Mm,
people who are
you're right.
general, because hunter gatherers, you have to be a generalist when you're a hunter gatherer. You have to do a
Yes.
lot of different tasks, and that's part of what makes hunter gatherers so incredibly resilient, is that most members of the tribe are aren't specialized. They're highly adaptable. But the upside of a stratified civilization is you have specialization of labor. So I think it's really crazy to see an example of that kind of bias in a mainstream publication saying that, oh, this has to be the work of hunter gatherers because that's our theory. And it makes me
Yeah.
think, well, so what? Graham Hancock,
Graham Hawk.
Graham Hawk, we're going to call him Graham Hawk from now on. Yeah. Mr. Just call him G. um, what GH put forth was this idea that actually, I when I first heard him say that, I was like, okay. And then that was a couple years ago, but now I see an example of it. So, if your statements have predictive power, that makes me pay attention to you a little more, because
Completely.
just like a scientific theory. If a scientific theory, you hear it, you go like, well, okay, and then you see something that was predicted by that. Well, time to reevaluate the other things that person said. Just
Ah,
take a
yes.
closer look at them. That's
Yes.
literally the scientific method. Is like predictive power is what gives value to a theory. Predictive power is what gives credibility to a person. So even if the kind of prediction was kind of like a social prediction of like, this is the bias that these people have, when I see something that where I recognize that bias and I'm not even an expert on this, it's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. It really makes me want to go read into that more. The internet is not having any problems right now. I want to appreciate that.
You put in some work and made it happen.
Yeah, I drove around this whole fucking town, but fortunately, this town's so small that like every place is like less than 5 minutes away from each other. So
Yeah,
it's not too
yeah.
bad.
Well, I thought I was gonna have my predictive power reinforced with the California recall election,
Oh yeah, that didn't
and
go how I was
I
expecting
was
it.
yeah, I was soundly rebuffed in that respect. Um,
Yeah, well, whatever.
it did make me think of like Chico doesn't have a self-conscious ego identity to protect. Mount Shasta does. It's like to present itself as this like new age place. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what the election made me think of, is that like leftist Californians feel an ego vision protectiveness for California to present itself as this liberal place.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
And
exactly.
so it doesn't matter that Gavin Newsom is completely corrupt and a terrible leader
Yeah.
and making things worse. Uh, he's still better than California not getting to be completely blue.
Yeah, it's and that's what's kind of a tragedy about the way that politics has become personalized and made a function of one's personal identity, is that it doesn't really lend itself to any flexibility in terms of like being like, well, this guy's a Republican, but Gavin Newsom's incompetent, so maybe I just will make a rational choice. You have to have this whole, if you're going to do that, you're like, what kind of person does it make me if I color this bubble? Does that mean that I don't support abortion or something? Well, I don't
Yeah.
know. Basically the room in even in people's own mind for making compromised judgment calls based on weighing things and actually choosing who they vote for based on like practical material considerations has been that scope of that kind of thinking has been limited, and so we end up with stupid binary decisions. Like, I don't know, can you imagine, like, what if you were running a company, or what if you were the leader of a community or something, and the in every decision there was only two options. There was no such thing as a multiple choice. There was no such thing as like, you know submitting different proposals and like finding the best option. Like, that's like a recipe for like, very poor decisions, I would say.
It's it's an interesting experience for me lately to be like much more of a overt individualist these days, and if there's a lazy shorthand politically, then it's libertarian. Um, and from that point of view, I'm now looking at a liberal community and a more left community from an outside now instead of from the inside for the first time. And like
Yeah.
seeing seeing the all the pros and cons more objectively, and there is so much to be gained and so much to explore in human connection, even in this current super stagnant version of contemporary liberalism.
Yeah.
You still have more interesting fashion on
Yeah.
average,
Yeah.
uh, a better range of hairstyles. um, in certain areas, there's still just more room to breathe.
Yeah.
Uh, and like I met a family last night that like I knew the guy, and then I met the rest of his family, and they all four of them are like super fucking beautiful human beings physically, and the two parents are like, they're old, but they're fucking rock solid,
Mm.
like clear-eyed, rock solid, totally beautiful, um, totally like stable rocks. But then the conversation was like it couldn't go anywhere. It like every conversational line just like went to a certain point and then stopped because there was nothing to like discover after a certain point. Uh,
Yeah.
and then like later in the night, I had more context of okay, I could tell they were stable business owners and running a business, and more like farm horse raising, pastoral, conservative type people, but not only that, they're also Christian.
Mm,
And so you had I was minded of like the trade-off that's
yeah,
happened in their specific situation where
yeah,
they have stability and they have like real physical health and maybe spiritual health too,
right.
but it's at the cost of like there's no passion in their marriage. They're
Mm,
just like running a business together.
yeah,
They aren't passionate about each other,
right.
and they aren't passionate about like conversations,
Yeah.
and they certainly aren't like awake spiritually to questions of the universe, because that's all, the
That's
church.
settled business. Like, what are you talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So
I
like
know. Hmm.
for them, like being Christian is a shorthand for being like, well, no, your religion is actually your family and
Yeah.
your horses. That's your actual spirituality. And you
Yeah.
just put Christian on top of it so that you don't have to think too closely about what you're doing.
Dude, it's crazy how much a horse is such a spirit animal. It really is. A horse is
But
actually people's religion. Like I've seen, I mean, I grew up around horse people.
it's
I
a
knew
good fucking religion to have,
it's
man.
not the worst.
Horses are amazing.
And you can buy a lot of things for them. You can brush them. They're shiny. There's this responsibility angle. There's like the horse is a majestic spirit animal that is actually more relevant to how people feel than a lot of old school Christianity. And so that's what horses and Christian stuff is super co-branded in our current culture, which is
But
fine, to be honest,
I'll just finish with the kind of
atheist horse club.
the contrasting experience I had where like I saw this ideal of like,
Yeah.
oh my God, a family. They're fucking making it work.
Right.
Like it works and they're stable. And then I was like, oh, it comes at a cost in their case, like that a cost that I would never be okay to pay. Uh, like however I do it, it can't be the way they do it because their stability has come at a cost uh, that would kill me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think what you're pointing at something that I have also kind of need to be reminded of sometimes is that it's really easy. Like I see in the world today how liberals are not really liberals anymore. That liberals are kind of an endangered species. What we call liberals
Huh.
are just the people who are kind of the inheritors of the momentum of like you know the other you know basically like yeah, like what was the people who were kind of formerly against religion are now religious again. Like we've come full circle, because like you can see like liberal religion is almost it's almost to a comical level, just a rebranding of conservative religion, and that's why that's why I think religious conservatism in general has massively increased on both the right and the left, and the middle
Sure.
has been drawn away to where there's this gulf in the middle where it's and coming I was raised and grew up in a conservative religious Christian right context, and then I naturally moved out of that, and I moved to a space in the direction that I, as you said, felt like there was more room to breathe, only to discover that they were busy reinventing religion too, except it was, masks, various social justice, virtue signaling stuff, climate change, virtue signaling stuff. Like basically, it's just all of the apocalypse was rebranded, the savior was rebranded, the
Yeah.
sacraments were rebranded, the
Yes.
the kind of emotional modes of processing were rebranded. You adopted all of the same kind of like thought terminating cliches that you're getting at,
Right.
where you have like not valuing conversation, but rather seeing conversation as a threat to being perceived as on the wrong side of any issue. So trying to shut it down as fast as possible, like because you're like, oh, we value social harmony. So if someone starts talking about something that we know might be controversial, like, oh, change the subject, like, okay, like
Yeah,
that's like what Christian people do, because like they want to
it
have like
is.
a, they're like, oh, we have the so and so's over for dinner, like, let's have a nice dinner, okay? Let's not talk about politics. If we start talking about politics, so this steak is delicious, like that kind of thing, like that is, you see the same thing happening of like totally not religious liberal people. They might not believe in like Jesus or God or whatever, but they do believe in like, you know you know their own pantheon of saints and causes and stuff like that. And it's really curiosity and openness is the thing that differentiates you from that
it,
strain of consciousness.
I think why that's happening is because it's never required more creative work from you as an individual to inhabit the middle ground
Dude, yes, to
than it
remain
has today.
open-minded.
It
Absolutely.
there's anti-gravity on you if you're going
Yes.
to maintain a mental space of naivete. You have
Yes,
to really work to
you do.
maintain that. And
Yes.
people who fancied themselves on the left uh, were not prepared for that kind of mental and spiritual rigor that today's world now requires of you to remain rational.
Yeah, because all you had to do to be open-minded in the past was opt out of the religious worldview that was being foisted on you. But now you don't even have the benefit of cultural adaptations that have helped other people. Because people have been trying to get out of Christianity type thought oppression for centuries. There's an incredibly well established tradition of people, who are like, the apostates. Like even back in like the 1920s, there was like total radicals that were just as radical, if not more radical, than the most hippiest hippie shit that you saw in the 60s. And in the late 19th century, there was also like crazy radical people who were all about like free love, communes, anarchism. Like it's been a strain of thought in American society, at least, probably other places too that I can't speak to. But yeah, even in American society, there's this, like even in literature, like with like Emerson and stuff, like the dude was a fucking radical. He did not believe in the church. He did not believe in, he had this like whole, like the oversoul, like all this, it was like the hippiest shit ever. So it crops up in the cultural context, whether it's late 19th century, earliest 20th century, late 20th century. But what it had going for it was that it had this thing called the church that had been telling the peasants how to think ever since the Middle Ages. So
Mm-hmm.
the script for getting out of that was really obvious. It was just whether you
Yeah,
wanted to or not. But now it's more complex because the religion is disguising itself, and you don't see it as a religion. You see it as being open minded, but it's actually closed mindedness sold to people as being open mindedness because it takes less effort.
yeah,
Exactly what you said. It takes way more effort to constantly have to update your frameworks to keep pace with the way that frameworks are evolving to get past people's defenses, because nobody wants to be seen as a religious dogmatist. Even Christian people don't want to be seen as that anymore, because there's been this massive cultural sea change
yeah.
toward acceptance. And so that's why like churches now are all about like, like everyone welcome and stuff. Like even if you're gay, you can come here and we'll like secretly pray for you to save your soul, but we're not going to like outwardly be like, like
Yeah,
get out of here, faggot. We're not going to do that anymore. Like,
yeah,
so because that's not acceptable anymore. So there's been this unconscious tide shift toward everyone trying to be the most like, like we're the people who are really with it. No, we are, you know what I mean? So I don't know, you see the results of it. I feel like there's definitely some kind of like middle ground, not even middle ground, but like outside perspective on the society that's definitely forming right now. Um, but like on the internet, people who are kind of like at least trying to come up with like interesting ways of, or at least individual ways of looking at the world. Um, I mean, for me, the most important thing for me is to not let myself become polarized, to not let myself feel antagonism, anger, judgment, literally towards anyone who is trying to dogmatize me. I don't want to hold it against anyone because I have been myself fully in the fold of both of those dogmatic perspectives at various points in my life. And
Uh,
I don't think I'm a stupid person. And so I'm not willing to think anyone else is a stupid person. It's literally like where you are at in your life that informs the tools you have to kind of see past. And I'm not saying I can see past all of them. I mean, I'm completely sure that I probably have some stupid, like some stupid takes that I have in my mind right now that I, hopefully in the future will be able to unearth. But they say like hindsight is 2020. When you get rid of something that's blocking your mind and you see the results in your life to where it results in an increase in openness and connection with other people, that's pretty good evidence that that was a good thought to dispense with. And so I
mm,
remember when I flushed church judgmentalism out of my brain, it benefited my life immeasurably. And I
mm-hmm.
also remember that when I flushed this like smug elite left coastal kind of like judgmentalism out of my brain, it also resulted in a massive increase in my ability to connect to other people. And I don't need to walk around society seeing people in like shitty pickup trucks going like, stupid animals, idiots. Like, I don't, that's such a dumb way to think. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're looking past the value of like half of society if you're willing to admit that into your consciousness. Like that whole like flyover state mentality is so toxic. It's
Yeah.
so dumb. There's some really incredibly intelligent, beautiful people in those backwood hick places that if you got to know them, you might actually learn something.
Mm-hmm.
And those people's perspective, as conservative as you might think it is so much more progressive than the average person's perspective like 100 years ago.
Oh, sure.
So,
Yeah.
or even if you want to go back further than that, it's even gets even more extreme. So, yeah, I don't know. I just this kind of historical perspective thing is harder than ever to have when the last 5 years contains so much material that you can spend a lifetime thinking about what the fuck just happened. It's really hard to look at the decades long progression of things and use that as a basis to form your set of judgments that you make about the present.
Mm-hmm. One of my prompts this week was uh, wanting to chew on free will as a achievement unlock.
Oh, like, yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, that was me integrating the determinist argument,
Mm.
uh, and because you can people who want to can take the determinism, the environmental behaviorism thing to a completely spiritually annihilating extent where someone arguing that point is willing to chalk every single thing you do up to environmental input and um, say that like any amount of free will purport that you purport to be having is a result of environmental privilege that was just foisted on you. And so my integration of that is okay, you start with determinism then, and you have to achieve free will. And even at a point of like maximum privilege and maximum options, there's still personally a new tier of free will that you need to attain to from there. And like it's a subjective thing that can't be compared to other people, the extent to which you are acting on pattern or acting by volition.
So, if that idea about unlocking free will has applicability, you'll see examples of the world and people who seem to exhibit that quality and people who don't. or they exhibit it to varying degrees.
It's like, yeah, people who accept life as it is, and people who can't accept it and must change it. And you see that in like some third world African kid who is starting with much less than you or I ever did. And there's a given kid in that village who accepts that and can't move, and another kid who will not accept that and is going to strive for a better and better and better and better life against everything his village elders are telling him is proper for him. And the determinist argument is that, well, he can only get so far, uh, and other people can get farther, and that's like a determinist thing. Like, he can't ever get to Jeff Bezos level because of where he started. But I'm saying, like, it's so subjective that it doesn't matter. You can only compare your journey to yourself and who you were yesterday. And that's what's universal in terms of spiritual attainment, is expanding your realm of free will past where it was when you started.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something you have to recognize on an individual level, I guess, how you feel um, day to day, like the sense that you have, you have sight and you have sound and you have touch and all that stuff. And like there's a kind of inner sense about how much like space do you feel you have that you're operating in to make a decision that is not easily predicted by anyone who just looking at you who doesn't have your perspective. That's kind of what, yeah, because you could look at someone in a society and predict with a pretty high degree of confidence that they're going to keep doing. They're going to do more or less what other people are going to do. So I think there's something about originality that is like is like a signpost that points towards somebody taking a willful perspective on the world. The example you gave about the person in like a village, moving away and reaching some kind of like attainment in an advanced economy, it's the exact same emotional impulse of the person who grows up in a highly advanced place and everyone's telling them like, you got to go to college, you got to become a lawyer, you got to do this, and they go, nah, I'm gonna fucking move to South America and live in a village.
Yeah.
So and so they also had that same fuck off, I'm gonna do something different impulse. And maybe it might be village elders in one case, or it might be like the media cultural establishment telling you, but you have to make money, otherwise you're not valuable as a person. So
Yeah.
it's almost like that what you really do doesn't matter. It's why you do it, where you're coming from, why you do it. That's because that is a thing in and of itself. That's like a choice that you're making. Is to what extent do you feel like it's your right to decide what you do and with your life?
Yeah.
And different societies have totally different consensuses about how much right each person has to decide what they do with their life. Because I mean, in reality, everyone has complete right of what to do with their life, except that there's just going to be some consequences if you step outside the lines. That is going to be different from place to place. You could totally, like, even if you're in prison, you could decide to not play by the rules,
Yeah.
and then you're going to get in even more trouble somehow, But there's a situation where, societies, it's this paradox, because societies which allow people to act as themselves are way more dynamic and way less stable than societies that enforce conformism, at least in the short term.
Yeah.
And so in that short-term way of thinking, and the reaction toward change, disturbance, uncertainty is to go conformism, double down on conformism, because that's predictable. That's reducing the possible space of threats of people who are going to act differently. So we're going to trade away some people who might do something really good unexpectedly to get rid of the people who are going to do something bad unexpectedly. And so it's kind of like it's like the mechanism of terrorism. Is it's like saying like, wow, people have the freedom to just like blow shit up. We can't let that happen. So we're going to
Uh,
take away equal measure of freedom from everyone because we don't know who it is, and you
yeah.
guys are just going to have to live with it. So it's this terrorism type mindset that has been haunting the West, which is a very, for historical reasons, incredibly dynamic society that is premised upon expansive resource acquisition and utilization that creates this massively economic dynamic system that is continuing to develop and destabilize itself from day to day to day and from year to year and from decade to decade. So, the war on drugs was a total reaction to like, okay, that is way too destabilizing, can't have that. War on terror, same stupid impulse thinking you can control
Yeah.
people, didn't work.
It's amazing how stupid it's gotten with
It's
the
amazing
war
how
on COVID.
it's
Like
yeah,
now we're going to destroy all molecules
yeah. Like you're gonna have
because
hand sanitizer everywhere.
some of the molecules might be
Yeah.
terrorist molecules.
No, it's the people now. It's the unvaxxed. It's the people.
Oh yes.
They're no,
Yes.
really, those that's who's being blamed at the moment. Never mind the fact that like you can still spread the virus even if you're vaccinated. And yeah, whatever. I know there's a bunch of anyone can cherry pick scientific theories to support what they think. I don't even think that that's why my whole argument about COVID is not based on science. I don't want to argue with people about what science says. I don't want to have this fact flinging competition like a couple of monkeys, at each other. I want to have an argument based on like values, just values and priorities. Just
Yeah.
saying, here's my values and priorities. Okay, you can say yours is values and priorities. You can explain how you got to the conclusions based on your values, and I can explain how I got to my conclusions. And that way, if we reach different conclusions, we don't have to have this stupid, exhausting argument about logic and reason and facts. We can just say we have different values, and therefore different premises lead to different conclusions. And then we can agree to disagree, and somehow that's much nicer than being like, you just don't understand. Because, you're almost giving someone a lot more respect when you say, I disagree with you, but I understand your argument.
Sure.
If you won't even say that, okay, I disagree with you, but you don't even understand, shut up, stop talking.
Sure.
That's a complete, or I'm not going to even listen to you. That's like it's a different level. You're not even, yeah, you're not really having an argument. You're having a do flinging
Yeah.
contest that the strongest, loudest one wins. And like, of course, it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. Um, I've never been a monkey. I've never flung do at another monkey, but I imagine that's exactly how it feels. It's not something you want to engage in on a regular basis because it gets your stress levels up. You have tension in your body. It starts to develop this view of other people as like annoying, and you become this like socially withdrawn,
Yeah.
conversational avoiding creature that is kind of like what a lot of people who live in dense urban environments act like.
Yeah.
Is they act like people who just are trying to avoid people at all costs for understandable reasons, because the nature of your environment promotes a kind of social consciousness that is very ungenerous toward other people with with your own time. So I don't really know how to solve that other than basically de-urbanize and live in communes or something. That's probably the answer. But
Well, my relatability to the free will thing I started this on was like each one of my decisions throughout life was like each one seemed like a free will decision.
yeah,
Like like your side of leaving the established church for this more liberal thing, and then seeing that was very church-like, and leaving the dogmatic fortress of that for something else.
yeah,
Like I, each one of my breakout decisions into greater fulfillment was like, oh, this is like me. I'm experiencing something that's me, because it's in contrast to like the pressures of outside. But then like each one of them still like brings me up to a new, bigger dimension of determinism that I then have to face the question again of, do I accept this state of reality, or do I accelerate free will to an even stronger extent than before to instantiate my own will in distinction to what I'm being presented with? And that's the sense I'm coming from, where I say that free will has to be earned, and you are never you never run out of excuses to go with determinism, and you never run out of opportunities to garner more free will.
Yeah, I think that that is a very useful way of looking at the world because it wards away laziness, and it wards away apathy, and it emphasizes agency.
Well,
So I like that.
sorry,
Yeah, no worries.
I found another thread on it
Sure.
of like, oh god, it's almost running away as I'm grabbing it. Like, here it is. Here it is. Is there free will at all? Is it all determinism? What's is free will real? Is free will an illusion? You know, in like the Lex Friedman intellectual, like positing that to some Dutch philosopher. And then the Dutch philosopher like tries to explain it as if it's explainable. The answer is no, there isn't free will. You have to fucking make it. It's not there until you put it there.
It isn't something you're gathering up. It's something you're making, certainly.
It's something you're
Yeah.
making. And if you
I,
don't make it, then it's determinism. And that's the rule.
yeah, I think like the whole like talking about it is almost like you can talk about anything in a way that either makes it seem like it makes sense or it doesn't. But you know, I don't know. All I see is evidence of it that I like we have a life and our life includes, the most incredible possibilities for good and bad things to happen. So I sure as hell feel like there's some will and that I need to do something about this. So that impulse is not something that I arrived at by thinking. It's something that I just experience. And to me that's like on the same that free will is a concept. It's not a concept. To me it's like something that's in the same mode of like seeing. Like I
Ah,
don't know, I'm looking at the fucking sky, it's blue. I can't explain what I mean by blue. The only way I know that I can share that experience is by looking at you, is by seeing you be like, do you see that? Yeah, okay, I'm just going to assume we're having the same experience.
yeah.
I'm just assuming that you're having the same experience as I am. Probably not exactly the same, but it's the same basic character that like I'm a person, you're a person. Okay, you can spin up whatever concepts you want about this. And I think the reason why we feel the need to define and articulate this is because it's a response to the way that free will has been debased and denied. Experience has been denied by like various religious systems that, like, I mean, if you want to take it to a comical extreme, Calvinism. Like Calvinism is the most it's like joke level theology that
Hmm.
like, okay, so like everything is just predicted, like, you know, John, I think just for anyone who doesn't know, basically it was like it's a strain of Christianity that um, basically took literal the idea that God knows the future, and so therefore everything's already known, and doesn't matter what you choose, and you're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. So just hope that you go to heaven. That's the
Hmm.
basic core of Calvinism. Like, give me a break. What kind
Hmm.
of life philosophy is that? That just takes, okay, the game's over before it even begins. All right, forget
Yeah.
about it. Why are we even here? I guess we're just waiting.
Yeah.
Like, what a stupid, like, I'm sorry, you don't need a theological argument to argue against that. You can argue against that on just experiential terms.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, whatever, if a God made the universe that was that dumb, boring, and unbalanced of a game, why do I admire this person? Why?
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna go with the devil because at least this
Yeah.
whatever hell is probably fucking more interesting than this shit, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah. So my point of like what we're still living with the unconscious assumptionisms of like Calvinism, Puritanism, and other not not other religions that are not explicitly religions like industrialism, urbanism, all these different isms that are the result of like historical occurrences and stuff are just like icebergs that are just butting up against each other and cracking and cleaving, and we're just kind of like floating around in this big psychic environment of all this stuff. And so when we have something that's central to our existence like free will, we go, okay, we're going to create an argument that we can say when someone says something stupid about it to tell them to fuck off. But the good news is that it doesn't even matter. You
Yeah,
could
it's
lose.
there.
Yeah,
It's there whether you talk it away or not.
exactly. It's objective truth. You could lose embarrassingly every intellectual argument about free will with anyone you've ever had for the rest of your life, and you'd still be right. And it just happened that you didn't know how to argue with fancy words against someone who's making a stupid argument that, you know, it's not like, truth isn't decided in some sort of like gladiatorial intellectual combat game. Um, Fortunately for us all,
Yeah.
and the kind of truth that is purely formalism. It's pure formalism. It's like we're arguing about the rules of this game we're inventing. Well, then sure. Well, in that case, whoever wins the argument is because it's an entirely constructed reality. But if we admit the idea that there's some objectivity in the world, okay, the fact that we have agency is pretty much the most objective thing we could ever land on, because like it's almost like it doesn't matter whether or not you think it's there, because even if you deny your own free will, well, you decided to do that, so
Right.
joke's on you.
Yeah.